Exercise isn't even about feeling better. It's about bringing you back to baseline. So I was listening to a podcast the other day with a leading happiness researcher, Tal Ben-Shahar, and he had an interesting point. One of the most important lessons he said is he's like, if I were a therapist, the first question I would ask you is just, are you exercising? You see, as human beings, like we are meant to move. We are meant to use our bodies consistently. And so it's like, if you're not exercising, it's not even about like being happier. It's like you're not even at baseline levels for mood and energy and overall health. And so the big idea here is that we should all exercise, and that exercise is the foundation in a lot of ways for happiness. In fact, as I'll talk about in this video, it's quite literally nature's antidepressant, which I know sounds a little cliche, but as I'll talk about a couple studies that suggest that regular exercise may be as, if not more, effective than antidepressants. So in this video, I'm going to explain the exercise and happiness connection and then give you a little bit of a how-to prescription on how you can get started with an exercise plan, whether you're already, somewhat active or not active at all. So let's get started. Let's talk about a few of the ways that exercise improves health, happiness, and well-being. And the health one, I think, is kind of obvious in a lot of ways. Like we all know that exercise can make us lose weight, maybe look a little better, but it's also good for our bodies, right? Improving our cardiovascular system and our muscles and all that. But there's some surprising connections to the brain and to our mental health as well. So the first kind of effect we have is that the brain is the most metabolically intensive organ in the entire body. And what that means is that it takes per unit or per weight, it takes the most amount of energy from our body, right? In terms of nutrients and kind of literally calories. So as we exercise, right, whether it's weight training or more like cardio, jogging, running, biking, etc., that improves circulation throughout the body, right? Because it's making our heart beat faster, so it's pumping more blood around. And this means that more nutrients are getting to the brain, right? Because you can think about it like as your heart rate increases and you increase that circulation, there's more blood flow through all areas of the body, and one of those areas is the brain. So that's one way that improves kind of cognitive function. There's also something that is produced when we exercise called brain-derived nootropic factor. I know that's a bit of a mouthful. We don't have to understand all of the neuroscience there, but that is something that helps us to consolidate and process memory. So actually with exercise, learning and memory can be enhanced. So again, speaking to the connection here between exercise and not just physical health, but mental health. And finally, you have reduced stress responses. Okay, so the actual stress receptors in the brain, those centers are diminished with exercise. And at the same time, there's a release of endorphins, which act on the opiate receptors in the brain, right? Those receptors that if you're taking painkillers or something kind of make you feel good, right? Same thing, but in this case, right, it's derived naturally. These endorphins that our body releases acts on those centers so that we kind of get a little bit of a lift in mood, and at the same time, it helps us to downregulate stress. So there's a lot of like biological mechanisms that suggest that exercise is really essential here. So I want to talk about quickly, I'll talk about those two studies. And so one of them actually was published in BMJ by last named Singh. I'll include a reference down there. That's SINGH. They found that exercise was likely as effective or more than antidepressants. In fact, they found that it might have been up to even 1.5 times, so that's 1.5 times, more effective than antidepressants. Particularly, they looked at mild to moderate symptoms of anxiety and depression. So now, another study. This one's published in Frontiers by the last name Netz is the first author, Netz. Again, I'll include that down below. They did a little bit more of a nuanced or more skeptical approach, right? They are a very established journal, and they tried to look at a variety of different studies. And what they found was that in most cases from the literature, exercise was as effective roughly as antidepressants. And further, when exercise was combined with antidepressants, for, in this case, not just normal people or, random people, right? People specifically who had depression, When you combine them, you had far greater effects, and many of those effects kicked in after you added the exercise. So that is pretty compelling, and they even kind of make the point in that paper that this may be kind of an underutilized prescription. Probably because if you go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist or even a doctor, right, you don't tend to think of like, I'm going to give you medicine, and what I mean by medicine is I'm going to tell you on a prescription to exercise 2 hours a week, right? It's like we're so locked into this idea of treatment as like, give me something or perform some procedure on me to make me healthier, that it maybe is kind of counterintuitive to prescribe someone, hey, go exercise for 2 hours a week. But they make the case that it's probably an underutilized intervention. So what we see is that people who are maybe struggling with well-being or mental health, that exercise can be a very effective intervention for improving that. And then, of course, if you're just already in sort of that normal range, this is going to help you to be happier and ensure you're at a good baseline level, like we said at the very beginning. Where if you're not exercising, you're probably not even near your kind of potential or your kind of baseline in terms of mood, alertness, cognitive performance, and overall well-being. So I'll give a final little background on the neuroscience, and then we'll talk about a path you can take or sort of a protocol. So now this comes from Wendy Suzuki. You can check out her TED Talk on this, which is excellent. If you just search her name, Wendy Suzuki, or you search like brain and exercise TED Talk, I'm sure you can find it. But she is a neuroscientist who started out, focusing on more traditional elements of neuroscience and got interested in this intersection of exercise and the brain. And she talks about the benefits of exercise really being threefold. You have the short term, the long term, and then the protective factors. So short term, because of some of those things we mentioned before relating to endorphins and effects on the stress systems of the body, that it kind of just gives you a short-term boost, right? It puts you in a good mood. And if you ever had like kind of a hard workout, a lot of times you probably feel it. Maybe you're a little sore, but you're like, oh, okay, I feel a little bit better, right? So there's the short term. Then there is long-term benefits to the brain and body, of course, healthy metabolism, healthy weight, all of the physical stuff that we know about, but also long-term, some of the stuff we touched on again before, that it improves brain health, learning and memory consolidation, and all of these areas in the brain activity and literally the physical structure of the brain associated with long-term mental health. And then finally, there's a protective factor. So people who tend to get regular exercise and you have these effects on the brain and body, they are less likely, so it protects you from a variety of other illnesses down the road, and particularly illnesses or mental deterioration that comes with aging, right? So things like Alzheimer's and dementia, when you have exercise to improve brain health, it's protecting against those negative factors, which of course can be very detrimental to well-being as we get older. So we now understand the case here, right? That exercise, yeah, it does make you happier, especially in the short term, right? It kind of boosts your mood, but it's not even so much about being happier, I would argue, as much as just ensuring you're at a solid baseline for physical, mental health, and overall mood. And so understanding that, we may think about, well, the how. Okay, so what's my approach to exercise? How do I do it? How much do I need? I'll walk you through a very brief but practical set of instructions that you can consider implementing into your week. So I really think we can break down exercise into three main categories. You have aerobic, which is kind of working your cardiovascular system. So that would be like jogging, sprinting, swimming, biking, playing soccer, playing football, all those things, right, they're causing you to work your cardiovascular system. Then you have strength or muscle, right? Technically, you can break those down into strength versus muscular endurance versus hypertrophy. Let's not get too complicated. We're just going to say lifting heavy objects or moving objects that are hard to move. And then the third would be like mobility and flexibility, which technically are a little bit different, but it's thinking about injury prevention, right? How do you stay kind of flexible and have good posture and all these things that help us to prevent physical injuries. Now, when you look at things like the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, and the Department of Health and Human Services, they suggest that 150, that's 2.5 hours, 150 minutes, 2.5 hours per week of moderate intensity exercise is good. And then they say something like if you're doing really intense exercise, it might be 75 minutes as kind of your minimum dose. So I'm going to break this into two parts. I'm going to first talk about the minimum that you want, and then we'll talk about maybe the ideal. Because if you're already somewhat active, you may be thinking about how can I make this ideal? And if you're kind of not exercising at all, I think it's probably actually a bad idea to try to jump into the ideal and do 2.5 hours a week, because that's kind of a lot of time. We may want to start a little bit easier. So we'll build up to it. So let's say you have no activity plan in your life, right? You don't do a lot of exercise. Here's what I suggest. You take that 150 minutes, break that up across 4 or 5 days, whatever is going to be easier for you to stick to. So if you're thinking 5 days, that would be about 30 minutes per day. If you're thinking 4 days, that would be about 40 minutes. So maybe you're like Monday through Thursday, I can do it. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I want to do whatever. That's fine. Maybe you're thinking about Monday through Friday. Okay. So in either way, whatever's easiest for you, I want you to take 4 days or 5 days. And you're going to say, okay, I have 4 days of 40 minutes, because that would be 160 minutes. So you're already overachieving. Or I have 5 days at about 30 minutes. Okay, so that's your foundation. Put that into the calendar whenever you are going to be best able to do it. So I suggest in the morning before you go to work, because when you get home from work, a lot of times you're like, I don't feel like doing anything. So you want to have the first step here is just blocking out that time. So 4 days a week, 40 minutes. When are you most likely to do it and follow through with it consistently? Or 30 minutes, 5 days a week. Put that on your calendar. That's step one. And you should actually, pause this video and follow along as you do that if you want to actually stick to this. Otherwise, you can just watch the video and be like, oh yeah, I should start exercising more. And then what happens? You don't do shit and nothing actually changes. So I suggest you actually implement this protocol. Sorry to be a little stern. So you've done that. What can your mix be? Well, I suggest that 1 or 2 of those sessions be trying to do some strength and muscular training for your whole body, and the rest of them should go to moderate intensity cardio. And so how could that look? Well, let's say you go the 5 days, 30 minutes each day route. Okay, so let's say on Tuesday and Thursday, you're going to do full body weight training. And then on the other days, you're just going to walk on the treadmill at an incline or go for a little jog. So for the cardiovascular piece, listen up, there's some specifics here. You want to aim for about 135 beats per minute. That's that moderate intensity level where you're still working your cardiovascular system. That's called zone 2 cardio. Okay, so 135 beats per minute. You can wear a heart rate monitor, or you can get one of those for like $20 on Amazon. But if you don't want to do that, the way you can test it is it's the maximum intensity where you're at the threshold of being able to carry on a conversation. So if you're kind of jogging and you're saying like, okay, I can kind of talk on the phone, but it's maybe a little bit hard to do, but I can still keep the conversation going. That threshold is about zone 2. So for me, that's maybe like a 5 mile per hour jog. It's pretty slow. So that is what you're looking at for cardio. In terms of strength, this is just lifting or moving heavy things, and you're trying to hit all the major muscle groups of your body. So that would be your chest, your back, your biceps and triceps, and your shoulders, your legs. You have your quads, which is like the thigh, the front of your legs. You have your hamstrings, which is your glutes and the area on the back of the legs. And then you have your calves and your abs. So that's a lot, okay? But you can break that down, right, into think of just a pushing motion. So maybe like a bench press, which is hitting a lot of the pushing muscles of the upper body. Then maybe you can do a rowing exercise. It could be a pull-up, okay, right? You're working your back and a lot of those pulling muscles like the bicep. And then you could do leg press or squat to hit a lot of the lower legs. Excuse me, not the lower legs, the main parts of the legs. The lower legs would be calf raises. So again, you can look up all those different exercises. I suggest you try to hit each of those with a couple sets per week. But again, if you're just starting out here, maybe you don't have time, you could go very far by just doing a chest or bench pressing type exercise, pull-up motion type exercise to get the push and the pull muscles, and then squatting or leg press, and then maybe mixing in 1 or 2 other things for the smaller muscles, some crunches for your abs, some calf raises, or maybe biceps or triceps. So anyway, that is a good protocol to get you started. So you've laid out those 40-minute or 30-minute chunks. If you're doing the 40-minute route, maybe one of them is full body strength and muscle. And if you're doing the 30-minute route, maybe 2 of them are. The other ones are cardio. That will get you a huge kind of minimum effective dose to help you level up wherever you're at. Now, let's talk about the maybe optimal protocol based on kind of a variety of both, again, those CDC, Department of Health and Human Services, government recommendations, as well as some other protocols from folks like Dr. Peter Attia. If you Google him, he's a pretty interesting guy. He's one of the world's leading experts on longevity and physical performance. He's a medical doctor. So the optimal version of this, remember we said the basic simple version is we're going to get 150 minutes a week. We're going to do some strength and some cardio. The slightly more optimal version, based on the literature I've followed, you ask a bunch of different people, they'll have a bunch of different things. It also depends on if you're training for a specific thing. If you want to be a strong man versus a marathon runner, obviously it's going to be a little different. But here's a scientifically grounded protocol that I suggest is a good place. So you take that 150-minute baseline, okay? That's going to be your cardiovascular protocol. That's what we want in terms of that low to moderate intensity zone 2 exercise. So in the course of a week, you're getting about 150 minutes of that. Now, getting a little more specific here, there's something called VO2 max, which is kind of your maximum intensity cardio. So think about going for a long, slow jog versus like the hardest sprint you possibly can. Remember, the zone 2 is 135 beats per minute. Okay, that number is for me because I'm 26 years old. It would be a little bit lower if you're older, but that's still around where you want to be. This VO2 max is kind of your 90% of max heart rate. And so for me, that would be 175 beats per minute. If you're a little older than me, it might be more like 170 or 165. If you're a little younger, it might be even 180. You can look up your 90% of heart rate, but it's basically 220 minus your age, and then you multiply it by 90%. So that VO2 max you want to do once per week. And I suggest the Swedish 4x4 protocol. This also comes from, I mentioned, Dr. Peter Attia, who's very expert in this sort of topic, which is 4 minutes of all out. Okay, so you're trying to hit that 90% of your max heart rate. Then you rest for 4 minutes, and then you do 4 minutes. Then you rest and do 4, rest and do 4. So you're doing 4 bouts, 4 rounds of VO2 max, 90% heart rate. The best way to do that I've found is just on a treadmill, but you can also do it just running sprints outside or something like that. So that's another day, okay? So remember, we got 150 minutes across the week of zone 2, 135-ish beats per minute, a little more, a little less, depending on if you're older or younger than me. And then 90% of your max heart rate, you're doing the 4x4 bout. That's once a week. The final piece here is strength and kind of muscular training. And so there's some pretty good research out there. I've seen a summary by a guy named Dr. Lane Norton, which I include a reference down below, who's a leading expert on nutrition and fitness. And I don't mean he's an influencer. I mean, he's literally a PhD who does research on it. He also is an influencer. So not just some guy on the internet. He is very well cited, and he talks about that roughly 8 working sets per muscle group per week seems to be the ideal range for building muscle. So 8 working sets means they're pretty hard sets, probably within about 3 reps of failure per muscle group. So again, we're looking chest, back, shoulders, bicep, tricep, abs, hamstrings, quads, calves. Okay. So the way I try to break it up is I'm trying to get 8 sets per week per muscle group. So you may break that into 2 days, you may break it into 3 days, you may break it into 4. There's a million different ways to do it, but you can add that to your weekly checklist. And then finally, you should, with some frequency, do some stretching and mobility just for injury prevention. I do 5 days a week, right? And it only takes me like 20 minutes. But what the research has found is that static stretches of more than a minute are ideal. And you want to do anywhere from 4 to 5 minutes, again, per muscle group for whatever it is you're stretching. So let's talk about how you can break this up over your week, okay? And so again, you have the sort of requirements per week there. It's up to you to break them into whatever works for you, but I'll just give you maybe an idea. Okay, so let's say I'm gonna work out 5 days a week and I have this 150 minutes. Okay, so I'm gonna do 30 minutes per day of that light zone 2 cardio, okay? That's 30 minutes a day, that gets me in my 150 goal. And then for another 30 to 40 minutes or so, I'm gonna do weight training, okay? So on Monday, maybe I do push and pull, and then Tuesday, I do legs and shoulders. Okay, whatever. I'm gonna work out half of the body. And remember, I'm aiming for 8 sets. So on those days, maybe I only do 4 sets. On Wednesday, I'm gonna do that max 4x4 day. Okay, on that third day. And then on Thursday and Friday, I'll do that same thing, push and pull, and then legs and shoulders. So what that would look like is Monday and Tuesday, I've just hit my whole body with 4 sets. Remember, we're trying to get to 8. Then on Thursday and Friday, I hit 4 more. So I've just hit my 8 sets there. On Wednesday, I did that VO2 max training. And then I did 30 minutes a day of steady state cardio. That is a really optimal protocol that really, I mean, if you think about that workout, that's probably going to take you an hour and 15 minutes or so, 5 days a week. And then I layer in, this is extra, but you could also just do this before you go to bed or when you get up in the morning, some light stretching for maybe 15, 20 minutes. So that would be, it sounds maybe like a lot, but if you're thinking about a research-based protocol to hit all those major pillars of physical health with respect to exercise, that protocol is going to be it. So I know we went pretty in depth here, but I hope that at the end you got some practical how-tos and we can step back and think about the bigger picture idea here, that exercise is really the foundation for physical health, for mental health, overall happiness and well-being. And so even if you're just starting very minimal, trying to aim for 30 minutes, 5 days a week, that's going to go a very long way in improving your health. And many of these studies are they're not done on people who go crazy and train for an Ironman or become a bodybuilder. No, they're just adding in some exercise. And like I said, they are as, if not more effective than antidepressants, and they're sort of nature's antidepressant. So even if you're not depressed or have a mental disorder, of course, right? This is just helping you to be at your best baseline in terms of health, happiness, mood, energy, all of those good things. So thank you for watching. As always on this channel, the Happiness PhD Project, I share practical insights to help you be at your best in your work and in your life. Oftentimes pulling from the art and science of happiness studies. This one was a little bit more sciencey, I suppose, talking about biology and physiology. But hopefully it is always a practical, useful lesson. So here's a video that YouTube suggests you will like. As always, you can follow my channel for more content, see me on social media, etc. So I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.